podcast that explores writing and reading books and authors from a Black perspective. I'm Ayoka B, and I'm here with Angela, and we're excited to host this literary journey. Today, we're going to have, oh, go ahead.
Welcome.
Today, we have two Black authors with us, Ms. Ivy Riley and Iyapo Yapa, and they're going to join us to talk a little bit about writing while Black, what it means to them, why they wanted to join us on this podcast, and their ideas about why there's a need for a podcast called Writing While Black. So we're going to get into it.
All right, well, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Iyapo Yapa or Iyapo Yapa, and I'm the author of 2 novels and a anthology book of short stories. My first book was Melanin, a novel. My second was Paradigm Void, and my third was And What of the Cargo. And I'm pleased to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak and be here today. So thank you.
Thank you. Miss Ivy?
Okay. Yeah, I go by the name of Ivy Thomas Riley, primarily because Ivy Riley sounds so like, yeah. So anyway, I happen to be the editor of Iyapo Yapo's work, and I'm here in Puerto Rico. I hope you can see my background, see what I'm looking at as I face the Caribbean Ocean. I'm here at Chino Beach. It's a really quiet morning. Tide is low. No one too much is out here, so it's a perfect time to be quiet enough to do this.
I thought you were in Costa Rica. You in Puerto Rico?
What did I say?
Puerto Rico by way of Costa Rica.
I'm sorry, Costa Rica.
I just thought she was flying under the radar. I didn't want people to know where she was. You blowing up her spot, Angela.
That's true. I don't know nothing about no Costa Rica. We in Puerto Rico.
So one thing I want to jump in and say is that I feel like, well, not I feel like, it's a fact that the publishing industry, at least in the United States, that's the only one I can speak on with any authority, is still not open to Black and brown writers, particularly Black writers, because that's what we're talking about here on this podcast. And although there's been some progress with some Black voices getting out there, the industry attitude is still, okay, we already have a Black one, so we don't need another, as if one Black voice can speak for all Black voices because we're a monolith and all the same, not to mention all the many genres and subgenres that exist when we're talking about books and publishing. And it causes people to, some people not to want to read because they don't see themselves. 2, it causes, I think it might discourage some people from wanting to, write because self-publishing is, I think daunting or seems daunting for people, although everyone on this podcast episode today is going down that road. It can be daunting and it's a lot of work, but I think people are taking the plunge and going ahead and wading in the water, so to speak, because they want to get their stories out there. And more importantly, they want the audiences who need them to receive them. So that's a little bit on what I got to say about Writing While Black. Angela, what you got?
Yeah, I was just trying to unmute myself to jump in because there's a couple of things I want to say. just to piggyback on what you said, or to explore that a little bit, this idea of progress. Oh, we're making some progress. I think I can look across systems in the system of white supremacy, like different areas, and see that same progress, which to me is not progress. My take is that the publishing industry is part of the propaganda arm of the system of white supremacy. And so any so-called progress within the system, in my opinion, is advancing the system of white supremacy. So I think that we're, like, all of us are going along that path of self-publishing. I personally feel like if you're within their system, you're with, if they pick you, then it's because they feel that somehow you're going to be advancing the agenda of the system of white supremacy, which for me loops back to why we need to be writing while Black, not just a podcast, but how important our voices are, and our voices getting to us, and us talking to us and telling our stories and telling our truths, so that we stay grounded in our reality, so that we amplify our reality, so that we're creating our present and our future. So that's what I have to say at the moment.
I'm gonna agree and disagree. As an avid reader, I mostly read Black authors, and the majority of them have been traditionally published. And when I say progress, I mean that when I was little, my mom had to go far and wide to find books for me that looked like me. She did it. And they were small independent bookstores, which I love and support to this day. But it was hard for her to find those. And now it's not. And the books that I read and that I buy or used to buy for my children, the picture books and those sorts of things, I still buy books for my son, but he's 16 now. But anyway, I'm saying that what I'm reading, and I'm a intelligent person, all of those books are not, a lot of those books are for Black people, by Black people. And for whatever reason they got published, I don't find subliminal messages in them, and I'm not refuting by any means the system in which we live. But what I'm saying is every Black author that has been traditionally published is not against us, is not, pushing forward an agenda that is not of their making. Some of them are, but I'm looking at Black as Fuck history. I'm looking at anything by Toni Morrison. I'm looking at, all of these authors that wrote what they wrote and were published. And there are a lot of them that are feeding a hunger that Black authors have. Well, Black readers have. So that's why I said I'm going to agree and disagree, because for whatever reason, there are some slipping by or slipping in. And maybe there's a larger,
Pool that we never get to see.
sinister thing that I haven't seen yet, but that's it.
I think both of you are probably right. I think that if it were not for traditional publishers, would we ever have heard of, Nikki Giovanni, James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, all those people? But I also agree that Broadside Press did a lot to bring forth voices that we would never have heard of. And that, again, is the independent Black publishing company. And without independence, it's so many people out here that need to be published that have not been published, whose works we've never heard of, that might have had as much impact on us as the Toni Morrison or Zora Neale Hurston, or we just never heard of them because they never got published and didn't have the wherewithal to get it out themselves. I remember it's been about 20, 25 years ago now. We published an anthology of poetry, and it was just as hard then as it is now to get that stuff out there. But we didn't probably had what was naive enough not to know how hard it was, and we just did it. So yeah, I think we just have to be vigilant, be careful in terms of who the editors and who the publishers are that we give our work to in terms of what is their agenda, if possibly.
I'm going to build on what all three of you just said, because within a system of white supremacy, and it depends upon what a person's belief system is as it pertains to a system of white supremacy. So I'll preface it by saying my thought process when it comes to the global system of white supremacy is that literally everything that is done or is allowed within a system of white supremacy is for the perpetuation of the system of white supremacy. When you see any movie or television show or read any book about Faustian bargains, which is just people making deals with the devil, they get what they get what they were promised. It ends up being all jacked up and all screwed up at the end. But if their bargain was to be rich or to have this person or whatever, they get the money, or they have this person, or they get this person, but it still ends up being all jacked up. My point is that the system will allow us to get some what look like some wins, and they're legitimate wins. That's speaking to what you're saying, Ayoka, because the key phrase that you said was that some slip through, and that's very true. So they will allow us some wins, but it becomes a case of like chess, where you might sacrifice something to win the overall game. And so to what Ivy was just saying, we just have to be vigilant and really look at what we're reading, because a lot of it is legitimate and by authors who do love and respect our people. So to that degree and to that end, we just always have to keep our eyes peeled. And yes, a lot of stuff that they allow is subliminal, and by definition, we shouldn't notice it. If it's subliminal, that the purpose of it is to not be noticed overtly by us. And I'll just tag this on as my final thing is what happened with me personally. I really got sick and tired of seeing other people who are not us telling our stories. And I think it should be our people who tell our stories. And it has been happening for a long time that our people have been doing it. And I'm glad to see that it's starting to grow and it's starting to flourish in that way. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think another thing I wanted to talk about for writing while Black, which I want to focus on, Black writers and Black readers, that there are our voices are important and are critical. And like you said, us telling our stories. And there's so many stories to tell and so much talent and imagination and creativity out there. And so as much as we can prop up Black writers, and get and let Black readers know about them. There's a young woman, Tiffany D. Jackson. I'm a big fan of her work. She is, I don't think she's from DC, but she lived in DC for a while. I know she went to Howard. I think she's from New York, but anyway, she does thrillers, but it's not a horror, kill everybody kind of thriller, more suspenseful, psychological thrillers. And I saw her post something. It was quite some time ago, but she talked about how her editor caught something that she missed. And she said for a book that she wrote called Monday's Not Coming, it was based in DC. And she said for her ARC readers, in her ARC, her advanced readers copy that people, read to give her feedback, all the slang was italicized. All the DC slang was italicized. And she said her editor, she made a post saying that in the final version, which was out at the time, she said, you won't find that italicized, because her editor said to her, we're taking this off because slang is not a foreign language. We're not italicizing this DC slang. And she said, and she hadn't thought about it in that way. She said she italicized it because she didn't want anybody to miss it, and she thought it was so important. And she said really it was for her when she was reading back through, because she wanted to make sure she ain't mess up no DC slang. She didn't want nobody come to her from DC saying that ain't right. And then just, I guess, stylistically, she decided to just keep it. But her editor was like, no, we're not doing this. We're going to normalize this. Take this italics off. And I just thought, I really appreciated that. And I was like, okay, I'm glad she had people that were really in her corner and said, this is what we're doing. And everybody else gonna have to deal with it or catch up or whatever. But and I don't even know, I'm making an assumption that that editor was Black. I don't know that to be true, but I'd be surprised if they weren't. But I'm just saying that this whole writing while Black, yeah, I mean, just being careful and vigilant, like Miss Ivy said, about who's touching your writing, who's editing it, who's publishing it, who's, because I think if we write from the place that we write and it's true and it's genuine, I just believe it's going to get out there the way we want it to. And it's going to reach who it needs to reach. I'm self-published. And I made the choice to do that because I wanted the control over my writing. I've heard some people that have been traditionally published that, they wanted their writing to be changed, but that's another point in which you make a decision. Are you going to let them change it, or are you going to stand firm and say, no, this is how it's meant, and whatever comes, whether they say, oh, well, we don't want to do it, or okay, but being confident and in your writing and deciding that's what you're doing, period.
I want to loop back and kind of amplify and explore, or not explore, but yeah, this whole idea of being vigilant. And I want to add that, or emphasize that we need to be collectively vigilant and use the wisdom of history and other people's experience, but also our collective experience as a people, not just in the field of writing, but just in our generalized experience across fields. So I think that the benefit of collective wisdom is that we don't each have to learn the lesson for ourselves. We can build on what other people have already experienced and what our people collectively have experienced. And just to loop back a little bit further, I'm not necessarily advancing the argument that the authors are Black authors who are traditionally published are actively pushing an agenda. So I don't want to, I'm not trying to represent that. But I think that sometimes, you being you can line up with what the system can use, and they can use you and they will use you, or it will use you, whatever it is. I don't know if this. Then also on the subject of the importance of writing while Black, somebody said they got sick and tired of something. And I'm like, I got sick and tired of Black us always being portrayed as sick and tired. We're in a lot of stuff, it's like Black people are criminals. We have to persevere, but we've overcome, through persevering, working twice as hard to get half as much, which to me means we're putting twice as much into their system and getting back, a little bit, that we're victims, that we're losers, that we're slaves and servants. And that's if we exist at all. So I love, for me, writing while Black is about showing us ourselves as we are, as we can be, and just reflecting, the power and the love and the glory that's like within the collective of Black us. And I'm not as avid a reader as you, Ayoka, but like one of the things I noticed when I'm reading Blood at the Root by Demarion, I can't remember, Demarion Williams, I might be getting his name wrong, but I noticed I haven't quite articulated it yet, but there's something going on with the slang and the italics. And I was like, I'm reading it, not critiquing it. So it's kind of like nudging at some part of me, but I'm sure by the time I finish the book, I'll be able to say what it is. And it may be that they're italicizing, slang. And I'm like, why? It's just people talking. Why are they talking in italics? But so that's interesting that you say that.